All right, good morning, everyone. We are speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Hips, who is actually a professor here at the school. She was a recent principal, or not a recent principal, but a past principal, early childhood education educator, and we're just going to ask her a few questions about assessment. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome. First question. Why is assessment important? Why do you think assessment is important for early childhood, for um, teachers? Why do you think it's important?
I think it is really important for teachers to assess their children for several different reasons. One of the reasons would be just to find out what they already know, because you don't want to waste your time teaching a lot of things they already know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to assess all along the way, formative assessment, so that you can see what their progress is and make adjustments in your own teaching. And then finally you need some sort of summative assessment that would allow you to have a good idea of exactly how much they've learned in any specific skill or unit of instruction or whatever you're trying to accomplish there.
Okay. Next question. What are key things for teachers to remember when planning and implementing assessment?
I think it's really important to know that you must assess. First of all, you must know what it is you want your children to be able to do. So you must assess based on what you want them to know and be able to do. And then, after you've chosen that standard or skill, then you plan how you're going to assess it, and then you plan the instruction so that the instruction will lead them into success in the assessment. Otherwise, sometimes children are bewildered by assessment because it doesn't relate to the way they've been instructed. So I think that's a really important thing to know there. And then it's also important to know that you must have a reasonable and useful purpose for the assessment. It can't just be for the sake of assessing, for just doing it. It has to be for either for planning for further instruction or for making a decision about a grade or something like that.
Okay. What kinds of assessments do you think are appropriate for early childhood education classrooms, and why do you think they're appropriate?
I think the most important and the most appropriate kind of assessment for an early childhood classroom is performance-based assessment, where children are able to demonstrate what they have learned through some sort of acting out performance. And it might be, the performance might be a written story or report, possibly, but oftentimes it's something like a skit, or they create a song, or they do a project, or they do some kind of in-depth study where they have pulled together integrated learning from a whole bunch of areas. So I think that is the absolutely most appropriate. The most appropriate is the kind of assessment that is as close to real life as possible. So rather than having them write their multiplication tables in 5 seconds, or maybe 5 minutes, instead of that, assess them by having them apply multiplication and understanding the use of it.
Okay. One last question. How, when you were a principal, how did you assess the curriculum or your school program? So how did you want, I guess, assessments to be for your school when you were a principal?
Well, I wanted them to be useful for instruction. The truth of the matter is, I know more now about assessment, having taught it a few years, than I did when I was a principal,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish I could go back and do it again sometimes. But even at that time, I wanted the assessments to be useful for planning for instruction. So I wanted teachers to assess frequently and to assess informally, frequently, and to group and regroup their students and plan for individual differentiated instruction based on what they learned from those assessments. That's the way I wanted it to look. We, of course, were required to use standardized assessments, and in fact, when I was there, we were giving standardized tests in grades 1 through 5. I didn't like it, but it was what we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we were doing it, I felt like we needed to analyze the information we got from those assessments, use that data to plan for instruction. If it was CRCT data, it came to us after school was out. So we could only really use it to plan for instruction for the following year. The next year's teacher could look at the CRCT results for her individual students and use that. And also the teacher who's sending those students on could look at the overall results and see weaknesses perhaps in places that she or he needed to shore up instruction.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Hips, for your input on assessment. We appreciate your time and your information that you have for us and your experience. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I was delighted to do this.
All right.